Hello friends, I am Arpit and I am here with today's analysis. Today is 20th of February and we are going to deal with three very important topics which are in news. The first is assessment reports by IPCC. IPCC stands for Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which was formulated in 1987. It is basically a panel comprising of the scientists from all the UNFCCC signatory countries. It releases assessment reports periodically. Till now, 6 assessment reports have been released. These reports highlight about the adaptation, the scientific, the mitigation processes which are needed to tackle climate change, as well as it is also talking about the vulnerabilities caused due to climate change. The sixth, which is the latest assessment report, highlights that the 1.5 degree Celsius goal, which we have kept for ourselves, we will be meeting it at an earlier date as compared to 2100. Next is the bubonic plague. The bubonic plague incidents have been erupting in the United States of America, the Oregon name of the places. Now this is a plague caused by the fleas, and from the fleas it can be caused to the animals, particularly the pets. And this case of bubonic plague in USA has been caused by a pet cat which was in contact with that human. The pet cat was treated, but unfortunately she did not survive. The human is under treatment for this particular plague. There is no vaccine as of now developed, but yes, antibiotics can be administered to treat these kind of plagues. Next is the Indian economy, a review, the series which we are, taking up. And here we are going to talk about the macroeconomic vulnerabilities of the country and how the country sailed through these vulnerabilities through the years, especially the post-pandemic years. Now, the first piece of news which we are going to cover is the assessment report by Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change. This particular report, IPCC releases this periodic assessment reports. How many ARs have been released till now? There are 6 ARs which have been released till date. Scientists from 195 countries which are part of UNFCCC is responsible for releasing the reports. What does the report highlight? The report highlights adaptation, science, consequences and vulnerability, as well as mitigation aspects of climate change. These are the major aspects which the report highlights. What does the latest AR say? Means what does the latest assessment report say? The latest assessment report, first of all, is the 6th assessment report till now. These assessment reports published by IPCC periodically. What is the period? What is the frequency? It is not fixed. It is actually not fixed. Following are the key findings of the 6th assessment report. The time to limit the rise of world's average surface temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius as agreed in Paris Agreement is running out. Now, we've discussed multiple times this particular 1.5 degree target. See, global warming will happen. So, we've kept a target for ourselves, and that target is x plus 1.5 degrees Celsius. Actually, standard format is not this x plus 1.5 degrees Celsius. It is just I take it to explain you guys that what is this target. So here x is basically the average temperature of pre-industrial era. Pre-industrial is basically the period from 1850 to 1900, these 50 years. The average temperature of these 50 years is x degrees Celsius. From that average temperature, we have to exceed 1.5 degrees Celsius, and this should be the global average temperature by the year 2100. And the assessment report says that this is going to be achieved way before than 2100. It says that the time to limit the rise of world's average surface temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius is running out. It also suggests certain ways in natural systems, man-made systems, in communities to delay the rise in temperature. Means these are mitigation strategies which have been suggested in the 6th assessment report. Scientists now have met for, I would say, creating or generating this 7th assessment report in January 2024. What is the deadline which has been set? No deadline has been set by the scientists for this, because the scientists have had previous experiences, and the scientists say that if we set the deadline too early, then we may not be taking into account various research papers which have to be published on climate change or global warming. So let us take our own time. Own time means we should not, just fix ourselves or limit ourselves that this is the timeline and this in this timeline we have to deliver. Whatever, report comes, and this report, the 7th assessment report, is going to be full of new findings. So that takes time a bit. Now, another concept we need to note is that global stocktake. Global stocktake, basically what it is a mechanism to measure the progress, basically collective progress, identify gaps and chart a better course of climate action. Actually, see, climate change is a fact. Is it concerning? Yes, it is concerning. Our countries respectively, they are undertaking efforts to manage it. Yes, they are undertaking efforts to manage it. So the efforts undertaken by the countries to manage the global warming or climate change, we have the INDCs, intended nationally determined contributions, how impactful they are, how effective they are. It should not be like we are just taking efforts or undertaking efforts, we are not assessing its, I would say, impact. That is something which is not required. So we have to do this. The UNFCCC countries have to conduct the GST every 5 years. This has been mandated. When did the first GST start? It started in 2022 and ended at the end of COP28 of UNFCCC in 2023, which happened in Dubai last year. So the first GST is basically out. The second GST is scheduled in 2028. The member countries have requested the IPCC to release the AR7 report before this, because in this AR7 report there will be multiple findings, scientific studies, that what can be done. Mitigation strategies are also there. How can we adapt more? What are the impacts the current, I would say, world is facing right now due to climate change or global warming? What are the new findings with respect to this? All these will be there in AR7, and that is why the countries have suggested that, before this release of GST in 2028, the second round of GST, that is global stock taking, please release this AR7 report before. And if, there are certain concerning findings, so in the third GST, they can take, measures accordingly. The countries, they can change their measures also. So it is like this. Now, some countries has, this was clearly rejected by the scientist communities that we cannot do it before 2028. And certain countries have suggested, chalo, you cannot do it before 2028, you can do it in 2028 when the second GST will be releasing. That also scientists have not concurred upon. There was no consensus with respect to that. They have kept this clear logic or clear reason that, we cannot set timelines for ourselves because research takes times, and if we set the I would say timelines, and if we get a key finding in 2028 or 2029, just after we publish the AR7 report, and that is very much important, then to make the people aware, to make the countries aware all across the world, or to make it more impactful all across the world, we will have to include it in the 8th AR, which is going to be released in the 2030s, and it can be late by then. So this is what they are keeping it as a logic. Next is bubonic plague. So in the United States of America, a case of bubonic plague has been confirmed, and this has been there in America since 2005. This is the first case in America since 2005. So in 2005, the last case was experienced. Now another case is there. Now, according to various reports, the person got this disease from a sick pet cat. So let us look at this. This is basically USA. February 24, a rare case of human bubonic plague has been reported in Oregon. The patient is a man who likely got the disease from a sick pet cat. Steps taken is that they have quarantined the resident as well as the persons related to the resident, and the are not believed to be sick, the persons. The cat was also treated, but she did not survive. This is what basically the situation was, that she is dead. What is bubonic plague? Basically, this plague is caused by a bacteria called as Yersinia pestis. It is a zoonotic bacteria. Zoonotic bacteria are those bacteria which can get transmitted between or from an animal to a human. Okay. So they can spread between animals and people. Yersinia pestis or Y pestis is usually found in small animals and their fleas. The term buboes is used to refer to the swollen lymph nodes. This is basically what it does. In the first instance, it attacks on the lymph nodes and swells them. If it is untreated, then it gets into the blood, then it also gets into the lungs. That becomes more deadlier. So we have to treat it when it is there in the lymph nodes itself. How can it be spread? According to the World Health Organization, humans can be infected in one of the three ways. First is the bite of an infected vector fleas. The fleas directly bites us. Next is unprotected contact with infectious bodily fluids or uncontaminated materials, like bitten by an infected rat or something like this. Then the inhalation of respiratory droplets, small particles from the patient with pneumonic plague. It is basically transmitted from humans to humans also. That is why those people have been quarantined in USA. So the vector bites you, means the fleas directly bites you, who is carrying this bacteria. If that fleas has bitten another, I would say, animal, like a cat or a dog, which is there in this case, the cat or a mouse, then you come in contact with that animal. If that animal, let's suppose, licks you, or you eat something which has been eaten by that animal or bitten by that animal, then that can also cause this plague. And lastly, people to people, it can also get transmitted through the small particles or droplets. So it is like this. What are the symptoms? Now we need to assess the symptoms differently. In the first stage, as it gets into the lymph nodes, then what are the symptoms? The USA's Center for Disease Control has said that it causes fever, headache, weakness and painful swollen lymph nodes, and usually happens from the bite of an infected flea. Then what if this plague is untreated over here and it enters the bloodstreams? It is called as septicemic plague. It follows untreated bubonic plague. If the bubonic plague is untreated over here, then it gets into the bloodstream and causes additional or more serious symptoms. Additional means these can be there, which we have seen, but more serious symptoms like abdominal pain, shocks, bleeding into the skin, blackening of appendages, and most often fingers, toes, or the nose. This happens. And last is pneumonic plague. Pneumonic refers to lungs. When this plague gets into or enters the lungs. Now, it basically it basically develops pneumonia, in which you feel difficulty in breathing and all, like we had in COVID duration. Now, it is the only form of plague that can be spread from person to person. This one, pneumonic plague. The other two, the previous two plagues were not, able to spread from person to person. But this one can. Okay. Is there a treatment for it? Actually, there is no effective vaccine against this plague. But it is treated by antibiotics. The timing is very crucial. If you start the treatment timely, then only it will be beneficial. The plague is a very serious illness. If untreated, it is always fatal. It will take your life. So, That is why timely responses are very much important. How common in this is this plague basically? Okay. According to CDC, there are 1000 to 2000 cases every year which are reported to WHO. However, the outbreaks are rare, means it does not spread now. It actually used to spread earlier. We'll see where the historical outbreaks as well. Now we're seeing this world map. So 0 to 10 cases over here. Then likewise, these are the areas: North America, South America, Africa, Asia. All these are impacted. Thankfully, India is saved from this plague. But yes, it had spread into India in the 19th century, 1893-94. This is basically 2013 to 18. Okay. So basically this is what we need to understand and see. Now bubonic plagues in the past. That is what I was saying, that we will cover this as well. The first was the Justinian plague. This happened in 541 CE. Now it started in Central Africa, spread to Egypt and the Mediterranean. It killed an estimated 30 to 50 million people. You can imagine the level of healthcare development over here. It was minimal. Next is the Black Death. The second kind of plague, when this plague enters your bloodstream, it starts to blacken your fingers or your nose. So that is what caused a lot of deaths in the 14th century. This is considered as one of the most deadliest pandemics in human history. Now in 1918 to 20, there was this influenza pandemic which spread all across the world, which claimed the most lives, which has claimed the most lives till now. Before that, this was the pandemic which had claimed the most number of lives. It originated in Asia and spread to Crimea, then to Europe and Russia. It killed approximately 200 million plus people. The Black Death was the single most deadly disease outbreak in history till the great influenza pandemic of 1918 and 20. The third pandemic, 1894, this is where, which impacted India. It originated in Yunnan, China, and spread to Hong Kong and India, then to the rest of the world. In India alone, it killed more than 10 million people. Means around more than 1 crore people were killed by this bubonic plague in India in the year 1894. So India is not aloof from this particular disease, that is plagues. Now we are entering into this Indian economy a review, which is a series which we are running, and we are into the second chapter as of now, and we have identified 4 blocks in this chapter which we have to see. We have already covered this domestic economy, domestic demand, what are the factors which are keeping it resilient and all. Okay. How it has contributed. Now in this particular session, we will be talking about this aspect, that is macroeconomic stability. Now macroeconomic stability, we will say that the macroeconomics are stable. How? We will consider strong output growth, means productivity is good. Productivity will be good only and only when demand will be good. So it is linked to demand. Next is price stability. This is the most important factor, that is inflation. The prices should be stable, they should not be volatile. If they are volatile, they will cause a lot of disruptions in the economy. And the next is robust external account, means imports and exports. They should be sustainable. The trade gap should not be too high. The current account deficit should be sustainable. It should not be unsustainable. Because if current account deficit is unsustainable, it will lead to inflation. We are an energy importing country. We should not forget that 85% of our oil is imported. So if this current account deficit, it widens, it will weaken the rupee. Rupee will fall down. Imports will become expensive. And remember, imports, the majority of imports, or I would say one very crucial component in the import basket is the crude oil. If that crude oil becomes expensive, everything in the economy becomes expensive. Everything in the economy becoming expensive means inflation rising. Inflation rising can suppress the demand. Now, if inflation is too high, just imagine a lower middle income individual. He will not be going for buying luxury products. Like, for example, he needs a set of glasses in his house, but there are 4 or 5 glasses left. Glasses means of let's suppose porcelain or anything. He will not go for buying that. He will say that first let me complete or let me fulfill my expenses, day-to-day expenses. If I will save money, then I will go for these kind of luxury expenditures. As of now, it was a luxury expenditure buying those set of 6 glasses for that person. So, in the times of inflation, meeting the basic necessities or meeting the basic expenditure also becomes a challenge. He will not be going for buying those set of glasses, which is considered to be luxury expenditure for that person. At that time, demand for those glasses will reduce, productivity will reduce, output will reduce. So it is going to impact everything. So these three are connected, and if these three are in line, then largely we can consider that macroeconomic stability is maintained. But was macroeconomic stability maintained over the years? Actually, this particular publication has picked it up from financial year 9 to financial year 14. At that time, there was high average retail inflation, around 10%. So you can see this financial year 9 to financial year 14, these are the blocks over here, and the inflation levels are too high. It says that average inflation of these 5-6 years had been touching around 10. So this is basically the 10 inflation mark. So average inflation was touching around this. FY10 you see 12.3% inflation, which is actually very shocking. Then from 2015 onwards or FY15 onwards, you can see the inflation reducing. In FY16, in the RBI, the Monetary Policy Committee was formed. Actually, tackling inflation is the prerogative of RBI. RBI before 2016 was, kind of in a dilemma always while it was releasing the monetary policy. What was the dilemma? On one hand, it had to control inflation. Inflation would be controlled with control of money supply. On the other hand, it also had to take into account economic activity. The output is robust, the economic activity is robust. That output will happen only when people will be having money in their hands. Cash flow is increased. So this was basically the two ends of the spectrum, and RBI was always juggling between these two ends of the spectrum. In 2016, the Monetary Policy Committee was formulated, and the only objective of Monetary Policy Committee was to tackle inflation and not look into the sustained economic activity. The only one job was there, to tackle inflation. That was the job of Monetary Policy Committee, and see the results. The average inflation rates fell down. But it is not like the Monetary Policy Committee has been formed so it can tackle inflation in any scenario. You just see this pandemic and global disturbances. It again led to rise in inflation from here. The Monetary Policy Committee, when it was formed, it kept a target for itself that I will maintain 2 to 6% of inflation in India. Consumer Price Index inflation in India. And if for 3 consecutive quarters this inflation surpasses this mark, then I will have to submit, Monetary Policy Committee will have to submit a report to the government highlighting the reasons of this particular surpassing. 2022 October, November was basically this FY23 which you are seeing. FY23 means 2022 April till 2023 March. So 2022 November, which was in FY23, was the very first time in the history of Monetary Policy Committee when it submitted this report to the government, because the inflation was not beyond this particular bracket, that is 2 to 6%. It was beyond 6%, somewhere around 7%. for 3 successive quarters. That is why you see this particular figure risen. The inflation in FY23 was large owing to the external shocks. Now, the price stabilization fund set up in 2014-15 has also been effective. This price stabilization fund actually stabilizes the rising in prices by releasing of or increasing the supply if the inflation is due to supply side constraints, and particularly the food inflation, agri or horticultural commodities, they are released by the government in the open market to increase the supply so that inflation does not happen. Now, stability in the post pandemic era, FY22, basically 2021 to 2022, we started recovering from the global shocks caused by the pandemic. The revival of the economy was being witnessed, but not for too long. By the end of FY22, FY22's end is 2021 to 22. April, this is March. In February 2022, the Russia-Ukraine war started. That is why it is written that by the end of FY22, the global economic environment worsened yet again with escalation of geopolitical conflicts. The global commodity prices shot up. Fertilizer, food, fuel, all those shot up. Supply chain pressures were there again, which were experienced during pandemic, but we had no time to mend those supply chain roadblocks, so they were still there. Elevated edible oil prices were there because Indonesia, it imposed export cuts on edible oil, so the supply of edible oil went down and this basically became a problem. In FY23, now the beginning of FY23, we started with the fresh multi-frontal challenges because it is actually the April 2022. The war has started just 2 months ago in February. However, India managed to keep its retail inflation below the levels of several other countries. How we did this? We diversified our import baskets. We were importing oil from OPEC countries first. The oil prices went up. We started importing more and more oil from Russia, which was offering us discounted oil prices. So, diversifying the supply sources actually proved beneficial for us. FY24, inflationary pressures moderated in financial year 24, April to December, with average retail inflation easing to 5.5%. That is 2023 we are talking about, April 2023 till December 2023. The decline was driven by benign trends in core inflation. Core inflation is non-food, non-fuel inflation, and it declined to 3.8% in December 2023. If I talk about the overall retail inflation, it was well within this band of 2 to 6%. It is now stable and not surpassing it. Now, the best thing was that we tackled food and fuel inflation. Could not tackle fertilizer inflation because we were import dependent on that. We were import dependent on fuel also, but we got discounted oil. We did not get discounted fertilizers. But overall, we tackled the food inflation. How? Basically, we tackled it. There were certain disruptions, like in 2023, there were heat waves. And when there were heat waves in March or April, it impacted the wheat cultivation or wheat crop. They destroyed a lot of wheat crop. Wheat supply reduced. Still, we managed to deal with the food inflation. How? Timely focus on supply side initiatives. Based on meticulous price monitoring and giving credibility to anti-inflationary policies, we, kept on releasing or we kept on sustaining the supply. Measures like strengthening buffers of key food items and making periodic open market releases of key food items like rice, wheat, cereals and all. Trade policy measures aimed at improving domestic availability of food. Preventing hoard, like at times we imposed export bans also on certain varieties of rice, for example, so that ample availability of this food crop is there in our country, not leading to inflation. Preventing hoarding through imposition and revision of stock limits and channeling supplies of select food items. We channelized the supply of select food items through retail outlets like millets and all. So it helped to meet the adversities. If you check and compare India's food inflation with other countries, you will see where India is there. UK, double digits. France, double digits. Germany, double digits. South Africa, double digits. Japan, in FY23, single digits. The blue lines are, or the blue bars are FY23, the yellow bars are FY24. Japan, FY23, single digit, but FY24, double digit. India, single digits. An exception. USA, double digits, single digit. So India is the only country in these countries which you can see where food inflation was maintained in single digits, 6.6%, 6.8%. Now it is expected to further reduce. Now, what has been RBI's role? RBI's supportive monetary policy has been there. In the monetary policy, RBI increased the repo rate from 4 to 6.5%. 4% was the repo rate in April 2022 and 6.5% February 2023. April 2022, just before this, the Russia-Ukraine war started. So inflationary prices started to mount. So this repo rate was also increased and gradually it increased to 6.5% till February 2023. And after that, the repo rate has been unchanged. If the repo rate increases, money supply gets reduced, hampering economic activity. So from February 2023, we are now 1 year since then. The repo rate is unchanged, means the RBI is aiming to promote economic activity more and more in the economy. RBI has also projected that inflation would average around 5.4% in FY24 within the notified tolerance level. So, with improvement in fiscal balance of the general government, the external current account balance, macro vulnerabilities as of now are moderated. They are not concerning as of now. This all happened due to timely and effective policy measures taken by the government. That is what is required from any government all across the world. You foresee the situation that can come, you take the decisions for that. If you take the decisions after the damage has been done, then your response will not be as effective as it could be. So this is what we need to take as a learning from the government's policy or the measures taken by the government to as a response to these certain uncertainties. And with this, I've ended today's session. I will be meeting you tomorrow now with more such informative news pieces. Till then, you guys very well know what to do. Keep studying, keep reading, keep writing, and most importantly, keep revising. Namaste. Jai Hind.